Okay. There we go. So, should start with the housekeeping business for the benefits of posterity and everybody who's not here, which is, once again, most of everybody. Yesterday there was supposed to be a scheduled lecture. Unfortunately, I was ill and could not perform such duties. That lecture was going to be critical to get the Laravel topic finished. We thus were not able to finish the Laravel topic. This is also due to the fact that in the first week of the second semester, in the first week of this semester, we had our class on Monday, and Monday was not a teaching day, so we were kind of 2 weeks behind on the class, which is more than the class could take given our packed schedule. So, unfortunately, we were not able to finish Laravel this semester, although we did get a decent introductory look at it. As such, we're going to have a discussion about assignment 6. On the announcements feed, I published what I think is a reasonable way of approaching the problem of assignment 6, which now, basically relies on content that was never presented. My view is that this could be converted to an optional assignment. The exact percentage I'm not quite sure, but in some manner, completion or partial completion of assignment 6 would count as marks to compensate poorer marks in other categories. It would be, I guess you could say, a bonus assignment on the course. So I think that that's as good as I can do for the Laravel stuff. Otherwise, I will, of course, be taking the assignment grade and calculating that over the 5 assignments that we have performed, equally dividing the weight of the assignments category among all the 5 assignments that we actually could do, with the 6th one contributing some degree of bonus. What say you? Does that sound like a suitable remedy? Okay, all right. Well, so be it then. So now we talk about the exam. Did I ever publish when the exam was occurring?
Yeah. Yes. 8 a.m. on the Thursday.
8 a.m.
On Thursday.
on Thursday? Okay.
The 17th.
Good. So yes, 8 a.m. Thursday we'll have our final exam. In terms of coverage, the exam is cumulative, and we'll have material from HTML right through to PHP. Obviously, we didn't get to cover Laravel completely, so there won't be any questions on the exam concerning Laravel. However, the rest of the course is on the table.
Are we allowed to cheat sheets?
You are, yes. Once again, you are permitted the 8.5 by 11 double-sided cheat sheet. Absolutely. Given that you had one during the midterm, I noticed, incidentally, that on the midterm, a lot of people's cheat sheets were kind of like, they had some space left on them, So if your cheat sheet served you well during the midterm, then I would say it's an acceptable plan of attack to bulk up the existing cheat sheet as, you should still go over the material from the midterm as it is still testable, but you're not starting from nothing this time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Any questions about the exam before we talk about some review topics? So you folks probably have a pretty good idea of the flavor of the exam by now. It'll be an exam similar to all of the other tests and exams that you've written with me. It will be a pen and paper / pencil and paper test. You know, with the specific formatting, etc. You are also permitted a calculator, although I don't think you will need a calculator. But yeah. So, best way to proceed with the review is to start our analysis at the level of the module topics, which we studied in class. I appreciate that 1 hour is not a huge amount of time to do a review, but we'll get done what we can. I will also just say that with respect to the grading, I'm currently in the process of typesetting the exam for this class. And once I've done that, which I should be done today, get that off to the printers, at that point I am in full marking crunch mode, and you should receive your grades for both of the outstanding assignments that I haven't graded yet this week. So, and if not, certainly just one of them. We'll see how it goes, but yeah. You're kind of, this class is kind of easy to crack off because there's only a handful of you to grade anyway. So, topics which you should consider testable for the final exam. First and foremost is HTML. Now, HTML is kind of a funny one. It's rather impossible to do most of the work that we have been doing this semester without firm understanding of HTML. JavaScript requires us to know the structure of HTML. To a lesser extent, PHP requires us to understand the structure of HTML. CSS certainly requires us to understand the structure of HTML. So hopefully, by virtue of the fact that you have been doing the course up to now, hopefully HTML is fairly cemented in your brain. And fortunately enough, it's also one of the easiest of the languages that we discussed this semester. Next, we have CSS with a subtopic, responsive design. CSS, yes, let's just get all the topics up. Under JavaScript, we have jQuery, we have Ajax, we have although Bootstrap is listed under JavaScript, it's actually kind of more of an HTML topic. give it, like, it's written in CSS and JavaScript, but like from the perspective of which language you're modifying to use Bootstrap, it's really more of an HTML topic. Bootstrap, there we go. We of course also have PHP. Which will include MVC architecture, sessions, user authentication, and we also have SQL. So, does anybody feel I've missed anything?
Laravel's not at all on the exam, or are you going to rewrite it and all that?
I guarantee that Laravel will not appear on the exam. That would be unfair. So, let me talk about each of these topics in terms of their big takeaway, the thing that, you know, I would expect you to be able to do, right? So, for HTML, I would expect you to be able to code up some small HTML component, not a whole website, but we would say, you know, something requiring multiple tags, something requiring multiple elements which have been nested, tables, forms, things in that category, right? For Bootstrap, be able to apply Bootstrap classes to perform some simple formatting. For CSS, you should certainly be able to write CSS rules to apply specific types of formatting. With respect to responsive design, this is more of a theoretical topic. Understand what responsive design is and how we might go about achieving it. But that would be one that was less of a code example kind of question. With respect to JavaScript, some of our major topics for JavaScript include being able to take information out of the document object model, being able to put information into the document object model, and being able to set up event listeners. So event listeners such as click and mouse over and that sort of thing. Does that make sense? You should also be familiar with some of the common pitfalls of programming with JavaScript, such as what happens when you try to access an element before the DOM is fully loaded. You guys know what I'm talking about? So, when the browser loads JavaScript, it loads the JavaScript at the point in the file where the script tag occurs. This is often in the middle of it processing the whole HTML file. If there are elements in the file that have not been loaded into memory when the script is run, searching for them will return a null reference. They haven't been loaded yet. So there are two approaches to solving this problem. One is to wrap everything in functions. As we know, a function is not executed at the time of its definition, but functions are executed when they are called. If the function looks up its own references at the time of calling, well, let's just say that in order for the user to click a button, the contents of the web page will need to have been loaded into memory already. So you don't really have to worry about the references not existing. The other way of approaching it is to wrap everything inside of the window load event, which essentially tells the code that it's only permitted to execute after everything has been loaded after the entire file has been loaded anyways. So, yes. Good. Any questions about JavaScript? Or any of the topics we've talked about so far? So far, so good? Okay. So, jQuery, be able to do basic things in jQuery. The types of document object model manipulation that I was talking about for JavaScript, please also be able to do those in jQuery. Modifying style attributes, something you should be able to do in jQuery. And AJAX requests. The way that we studied AJAX requests in this class was to use jQuery to perform them. We are using jQuery syntax as opposed to JavaScript, vanilla JavaScript's fetch syntax. So, AJAX was a topic. We spent a whole week on it. So, you should reasonably be expected to perform an AJAX request in terms of you should be able to code an AJAX request. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So, with respect to PHP, there are, of course, the PHP basics. You need to know how to read information into a PHP script, which is sent from the client. You need to know how to send information back to the client. So you need to cover input and output. That's fairly basic. You need to know about filtering inputs. So use of the filter input function. You need to be familiar with that. After that, you should be aware of MVC architecture. Now, MVC architecture would be a very long coding question on an exam. And for our purposes in this class, you can consider MVC to be a theoretical topic rather than a practical coding topic. So be familiar with what MVC architecture is and does. Understand the roles of each of M, V, and C. What are these things supposed to do, right? Yep, that's about right. Sessions. For sessions, you should understand cookies. You should understand what is meant by the session identification number. Understand some security considerations relating to sessions. Understand how to pull information from a session and also how to store information in a session. Fortunately, that's fairly easy. All you have to do is start the session and then use the session superglobal to get that data. So fortunately, it's not that difficult, but nevertheless, you should know how to do it. And with user authentication, I would consider this, again, to be one of the more theoretical topics. Does that make sense? Finally, structured query language. Be able to and comfortable with writing some simple or, well, write some queries. That's what you need to be able to do, is write some queries. Does that make sense? Okay. Is there anything anybody would like me to go over?
Can we go over Ajax?
Sure, absolutely. So, all right. So with Ajax, first, what does Ajax stand for?
Something JavaScript?
Yes. It's asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So, the purpose of Ajax is for the JavaScript embedded in your web application to be able to communicate with the server to fetch additional information without causing a page reload, right? So, most of the ways that we have of retrieving information from the server require a page reload, using the URL address bar, clicking on a link, submitting a form. In recent years, it's become increasingly popular to not reload the page, but to load additional resources into the same page using Ajax. So, with Ajax, we learned how to use the jQuery syntax for it. Let me just pull up the slides. So using jQuery, we start off an Ajax request by providing either get or post. There are other methods besides this, but these are the two that we studied in class, get and post. We then provide there are a couple of alternative syntaxes. The first parameter will be the remote resource that you are trying to fetch. This will most of the time be a PHP script. Does resource have a C there? I don't think it does, actually. next parameter is an object containing all of the key and key value pairs that we are sending to the server. These will eventually show up in the PHP script inside of either the get or post superglobals, depending on what method you used to send the data initially. So, something like name is Nick, hobby, gardening, though you wouldn't know it to look at it. The next thing we provide is the callback function. Most of the time, the callback function will be an anonymous function. But it is also valid to define your callback function elsewhere in JavaScript as its own standalone function and provide it by reference to the AJAX request. So, quick note on that. Can anyone tell me the difference between this callback, what's the difference between these two?
For the second one, you're going to call back a function.
Sorry, say that a little louder,
You're
please.
going to call back a function. For the second one.
This is called, well, they're both, let's say that in both cases we have function callback,
I think he likes it better when other people.
which is defined up here, right? So in both cases, the function is defined. The round braces here do not designate this as being a function. Its use in the function declaration tells us it's a function. So, what do the round braces mean?
The bottom would be calling the function to use, and the top one is a reference to the function.
Exactly so. This is calling the function, and this is a reference to the function. When we are providing the callback function to the AJAX request, we do not want to call it immediately. We want it to be called when we hear back from the server with respect to this request. So, if we were to include the round braces here, that would be incorrect. That would call the function immediately. This is one of the biggest pitfalls with respect to not just AJAX queries, but also event listeners as well. Good. So there is one final option, which is actually optional, and that is the data type that we expect to hear back with. Much of the time this will be JSON, but it can be other things as well, such as text, and I think CSV would work as well. Possibly, maybe check my math on that. Oh, XML would certainly be one. expected data type of response. So, does this make sense? So one thing that you can use, you know, just off the top of my head, if one thing that you could use an Ajax script for, let's say, for example, you are you have some JavaScript code which you know, is meant to display a table with information derived from a database on the server. We can send an Ajax query to the script on the server. That script on the server looks up the data in the database. The data in the database is then transferred through the PHP script to the client. It's then interpreted by JavaScript, and the callback function would, for example, put that information into a table. Does this make sense? So, is there anything I missed about Ajax, do you think?
Can you just do a little go over of JSON requirements as well?
JSON? Sure. So, JSON, do you still need this? Maybe take a picture if you need it. I mean, I'm recording it, but still. Good. So, the best way to conceptualize JSON is to understand what problem it solves, right? Let's say in JavaScript, we have some lovely data structure. We want the information from that data structure transferred to the server. We can't just take our array and dump it in, right? HTTPS communication sends character encoded information, unless it states otherwise, of course, but in general, it's character encoded information. So we need some kind of intermediary format so that the data can be transferred over the internet. Secondarily, it turns out that this is also very convenient if you want to store the information in files, because files are also character encoded. So, essentially, if we have our client and we have our server, if we have a data structure and we want to send it, we must first encode it as JSON. Now, very important to know, JSON is always, always, always string data. If it is in JSON format, it is a string. So, we pass it through JSON.stringify. I hate that name, but nevertheless, that's the name for it. It can then be transferred in the form of a request. Once it hits the server needs to decode it. If this is PHP, then that will be JSON decode. This will turn it back into a data structure. Make sense? Some of the time, the thing that you want to do is you want to send some data to the server, have the server mutate or modify that data, and then send it back to you. So if we imagine that PHP takes care of modifying the contents of the data structure, when sending it back to the client again, we must pass it through JSON encode before being able to transfer it over the internet in the form of a response packet. When it arrives back at the client, we will need to call JSON.parse explicitly or implicitly. If you have specified JSON as the expected return type of an AJAX request, this step comes for free. Otherwise, you have to perform it manually. So it is possible to read JSON data from the server, not specifying the return type or specifying it as text. All you need to do is take the returned data and pass it through JSON.parse before you do anything with it. So far so good. Structurally, what JSON actually looks like. It's a string. At the top level, it will be either a list or an object. So the whole JSON is either a list of things or an object, which is to say key-value pairs. In addition, however, each value can be any of the following: another array, another object, an integer, a boolean, a float, a string, and I think null is allowed as well. So, using these rules, JSON is a recursive data structure. So, we can have something like a list at the top level, containing lists inside, a diagonal matrix. This can be encoded as a JSON fairly directly. This one doesn't contain any dictionaries. Another cool thing about JSON is that if you take a JSON string and just copy paste it directly into JavaScript source code, it's also how JavaScript source code will interpret data structures. So you can actually just straight up just load a JSON string into your, like dump it directly into your source code and it will work, at least in JavaScript. Does that make sense? Any questions? Fairly, any more questions about JSON or AJAX or anything like that? Okay. Any other topics?
What do you think we did the most poor on for the midterm?
What do I think you guys did
As a
most poorly
class.
on in the midterm? Well, I can't. I can offer general advice to the whole class, but you know.
You, out of everybody, probably know best what we need to work on as a class.
Plain old vanilla JavaScript. That said, I don't think that this, like, whether this applies to you two specifically, I actually, like, I can't remember who did what solution on what task. If I tried, it would.
We're thinking about them too through the video.
Okay. All right. Well, this is for your benefit as well. Brush up on your JavaScript, folks. Yeah. So yes, on the midterm, SQL was generally quite well done. HTML, generally speaking, was quite well done. The basic CSS stuff was pretty well done. Definitely the place where everybody felt pieces was on the JavaScript. So,
What about the PHP? How was it?
oh, did we have that much PHP on
One
the?
question.
I think it was one big question.
Yeah.
For JavaScript, we have two.
I think a lot of people didn't attempt that one, if I'm recalling correctly. The people.
PHP is also one that people should
Yes,
probably-
PHP is definitely one that people should work on. Yeah, so if my memory is serving me, which, it might not, but maybe it is, those who attempted the PHP question tended to do reasonably well on it, I think better than JavaScript. JavaScript's a tricky language. JavaScript is definitely the hardest language of all the languages that we studied this semester. Despite the fact that we spent more time on PHP, I think, than any other one.
Yeah. Even in the assignments, we did more PHP than JavaScript.
I think we worked a lot on PHP after the midterm. Too,
Yeah.
Because everything we've worked on since the midterm has involved PHP.
Certainly. Yeah, so definitely, you can expect some PHP on the final. But yeah, yeah, like just kind of brush up on your basic JavaScript for sure. Yeah. Anything else I want to make comment on with respect to the midterm? I still have a bunch of them at my desk if people want to come pick them up, I think. So, or maybe I did end up handing most of them
Yeah, I
out.
think
But,
we did.
yeah, did I?
Depending if the people actually showed up to class or not.
Yeah. Well, does anybody have any question they can ask in 2 minutes?
Can you, do you know, I don't know if you can answer it or not, but which topic takes a huge part of the exam? Is it MVS?
I would guess PHP or HTML.
Because PHP was not a huge part of the midterm, so.
Yeah, but
And it is most of the material that we've covered
we've
since.
done a lot of PHP, so that's why I would guess PHP.
Yeah.
And a lot of the topics involve PHP, like the MVC and the sessions, user authentication is all through PHP.
Let me put it to you this way. Study PHP, study JavaScript, or you will fail. I think between PHP and JavaScript, that's over half of the exam. I'm not, I haven't actually done this tally, but this is kind of my feel for it is between those two. And to be honest, those are the major coding languages. Everything else is a domain-specific language that we covered for 1 week, so.
That makes sense, because even a lot of what we do through PHP involves JavaScript, and pretty much everything we have done going forward has involved both of them.
If there's one thing that hopefully we managed to accomplish in this course, it's sure, each one of these are their own language, but you require all of them working together to form a web application, right? It's incorrect to view these as being siloed languages or operations. Everything is interconnected with everything else, right? Any other questions or comments?
I heard that you said you can take the 20% of the midterm and add it to the exam. Are you still speaking the same or no?
Oh yeah, I did say that, didn't I?
Yeah, I wasn't here, but.
Yeah, I was going to do an alternate grade scheme. So basically the way it would work is either, thank you for reminding me, I had actually completely forgotten about that. Because people did generally pretty poorly on the midterm,
I did good.
if you basically, if you do better on the exam than you did on the midterm, which hopefully most people will, I will take the percentage from the midterm and add it to the exam. So basically, you can think of there being two grade schemes, one which includes the midterm and one which doesn't, and I'll take the maximum of the two of those for everyone in the class. Now, people normally don't do better on the exam than they do on the midterm, right? It requires effort to do better on the exam than on the midterm. So I like, historically speaking, when I've offered this, except in rare cases, people rarely see a bump to their final grade that's more than 2 or 3, well, 3 to 5% kind of on the outside when there is an increase, and most of, like, probably usually about 10% of the class, 15% of the class manages to be advantaged by the policy.
When you only have 10 people in the class, it's 1.5 people.
Yes, hope springs eternal.
I mean, we've covered so much PHP and JavaScript since the midterm that, like, personally, I feel like I would do better, but I guess it
Yeah.
depends on how complicated
But
you make
you don't,
it.
Yeah.
you don't feel that we're doing better than first semester, even though the material is harder, like as a class?
Oh, everybody has really improved since last semester,
I know.
absolutely. I mean, it's kind of just a matter of time served, you know? Yeah, no, every single person in this class has improved since last semester. You know, and some people have strengths in some languages and weaknesses in other languages, which is what you would expect to see, right? For some people, like, server programming just makes sense. These are kind of the more, like, technically minded, back-end people. For some people are just really good at making a nice looking web page, you know? But maybe the back-end stuff is not, you know, so much a strength, you know? It's like, you know, realistically speaking, in industry, you would be talking about different jobs a lot of the time anyway. You would be talking about front-end and back-end developers, right? People work in teams on these sorts of things a lot of the time, right? So, but yeah, no, everybody has improved a lot since last semester, and I hope that you folks will continue improving going forward to the termination of your degree. So, yeah, all right. So much for web programming.